So, a while ago I made a video on the channel listing the most powerful Knights Radiant orders from the Stormlight Archive in order from weakest to strongest. At the time I was trying to make a list based on what we currently know of their powers and who would win in a straight up fight. And I'm pretty happy with the list based on those parameters. But when we consider the actual full potential of any Knights Radiant order, that list would have to be greatly altered. Well, this video began as an addendum to that video where I discussed the most powerful orders based on their pure potential. However, shortly after I began thinking about the true potential of these different orders, something really stood out. The Bondsmiths were just too overpowered. All of the orders have some incredible potential, but the potential of the Bondsmiths put them far beyond any other Knights Radiant order in terms of power. So because of that, I decided to change the focus of this video to really dig down and understand the true power and potential of the Bondsmiths. Now, don't get me wrong, Kaladin could probably take Dalinar in a fight as things stand right now. However, that's only because Dalinar is still very untrained in his abilities. If Dalinar were to completely master his Bondsmith's capabilities, I fully believe that it would take a shard or another Bondsmiths to bring him down. I mean, I always say that Aeon Door is the most powerful Cosmere magic system, and as a system overall it still is, but a Bondsmith like Ishar could easily defeat any Elantrian hands down without even breaking a sweat. But before we get into the nitty-gritty details of how this all works, we need to first understand what makes a Bondsmith so powerful and how that power would be utilized. We need to build a foundation before we can make our conclusion, which is why I've had to split this video up and make this video part 1, with part 2 coming later this week. There's just so much to get through, and you really first need to understand the foundation behind what a Bondsmith can do. You see, we're told that Bondsmiths forge and manipulate bonds, but that's a bit misleading. It makes you think that all they should really be able to do is bind people together or forge bonds between humans and Spren in some way. But Bondsmiths don't forge and manipulate bonds, or at least that's not exactly all they do. You see, what Bondsmiths really manage to do is manipulate the spiritual aspect of connection, and by extension identity and fortune as well. Hey, just a second before we get into the video. Did you know that I'm aiming to hit 10,000 subscribers by my birthday this coming June? It's a bit of a crazy goal, I know, but if you'd consider subscribing, I'd be extremely grateful. Plus, it allows you to stay up to date with any videos I post. I regularly make content on the Cosmere, Wheel of Time, and many other fantasy series. And if you've already subscribed, you're absolutely awesome. Anyway, thanks for your time and enjoy the video. Connection, identity, and fortune. Now, before we jump into exactly how Bondsmiths are so overpowered, we need to first understand the significance of changing a person's spiritual attributes. If you need a refresher on realmatic theory, then I suggest checking out my video on the topic. What we'll be focusing on here, however, is the spiritual realm and the 3 primary attributes to each person's spirit web or soul. You see, a person's soul or spirit web is built out of these 3 attributes. Connection is the different links and connections one has built over the course of one's life. So all the people you know and have a relationship with, all the places you've been, all the items, concepts, and locations that have significance to you, all of these are different connections that shape your spirit web. Then you have identity, which is the way you see yourself. All the different notions and ideas you have about who you are, the kind of person you once were, and the kind of person you eventually like to become. Your views within the world, people, and your place within it all. And if you're a magic user, it's also how you see yourself as a magic user as well. All of this makes up your spiritual identity. And then, of course, we have fortune. Fortune is a bit tricky to explain, so let me try to clarify it as best I can. In the spiritual realm, you have neither time nor space. It is a realm that transcends distance and time. Within the realm, you are all places at all times and no places at no time. Shards of different Cosmere worlds primarily reside within the spiritual realm due to the fact that it allows them to see all things and be all places. Now, fortune is basically the word to describe that lack of time within the spiritual realm. Fortune dictates all the different directions you could go in life. It is your future, your present, and your past. And while any and all future sight or foretelling is accomplished by tapping into fortune, fortune isn't just looking into the future. You could look at fortune to see your past self, or the self you would have been had you taken different paths. If you've read Mistborn, Gold and ATM tap into this. ATM uses fortune to see the future. Gold uses fortune to see the present had you done things differently in the past. I know I kind of just threw a lot of things at you guys with connection, fortune and identity, but I unfortunately don't really have time in this video to fully explain all the different concepts in huge amounts of detail. Just trust me when I say that connection is your bonds, identity is yourself, and fortune is your timeline or potential timeline. If you haven't watched my Cosmere 101 playlist yet, I highly recommend you do, since I cover all the basic concepts of the Cosmere in a spoiler-free way. Anyway, now that you understand the 3 different spiritual aspects, we can continue. My theory, and I haven't checked if there's any information to contradict this, so just bear with me, but my theory is that each of these 3 aspects build on each other. There's a hierarchy, with one of these being the foundation on which the other 2 can operate. One of these 3 aspects is the foundation the others build on, and without this aspect it would all fall apart. I believe that spiritual connection is the most important of the 3 spiritual aspects, because it will determine or dictate your identity and fortune. If you meddle with connection, you're meddling with identity and fortune as well, though perhaps in a more indirect way. Think about it. Let's say I wanted to change the future of someone via the spiritual realm. I want to essentially affect their fortune. Well, fortune is difficult to affect. It is all of time and possibilities squashed into one aspect. Meddling with it directly is hard if not impossible to do. But what if I messed with connection? Let's take Dalinar as an example, and let's say I want to manipulate his spirit web to where he never becomes a Radiant. Well, how do I manipulate his fortune to avoid him bonding the Stormfather? If I encountered Dalinar as a young boy and I wanted to ensure with almost 100% accuracy that he would never become a Radiant or even go to the Shattered Plains in the first place, how would I do that? Well, short of just killing him, of course, I would alter his spiritual connection. Just consider it. Dalinar's 2 primary influences on his identity is his Alethi heritage and his position in the Kholin house. Change these 2 things and you change Dalinar's identity completely. Change his spiritual connection from Alethkar to a country like Yakaved, change his spiritual connection to his family to a family of random farmers. This change of connection would directly influence his identity. And once his connection and identity has changed, he would make different choices and take different actions. Therefore, his fortune would change as well. Connection is the primary base. Identity is built on connection. Fortune is built on both connection and identity. Change connection and you change everything. Just look at Forgery. If you haven't read The Emperor's Soul, don't worry, I won't touch on any story spoilers, but I do want to look at the magic and the overall premise of the story. Forgery allows you to do exactly what we've touched on here. In the story, our protagonist needs to essentially use forgery to restore the personality of a brain-dead person. So how does she do this? Through deep study of that person's life and relationships. She needs to have a really intimate understanding of the person in order to create a soul stamp that will work. In fact, with forgery, you need to have an intimate understanding of whatever you intend to use a soul stamp on. To change a wall, for example, from one that's solid to one that has enough weakness in it where it can be broken down, requires knowing the type of stone in that wall, where it was quarried, how it got to the building, how it was shaped and used during construction, who the builder was, etc. The same goes for a person. You need to know everything about them. So Shai, the protagonist of Emperor's Soul, needs to understand this person's childhood, their relationships, events in their past, etc. She needs to understand every connection this person has made in their past. Once you know everything, you can manipulate connection directly in order to change the identity and thus the fortune of a person. For example, in order for Shai to change herself into a warrior, she needs to use a soul stamp that changes her connection to her homeland to a different land where people are trained as warrior monks. This shapes her identity. That then directly influences her fortune, as you can see by how the story plays out at the end. Now, if you're afraid that this sounds super overpowered and broken, don't worry. You're right, and it is. With Forgery, you can essentially change your connection to whatever you want. You can make yourself an Elantrian, you can make yourself a Radiant, you can make yourself a Mistborn. That's definitely way too broken, I would say. Fortunately, Forgery has some key limitations that prevent this magic from just overtaking everything. For one, you can only do it if you're from my pon on the world of Cell, and even then it's not a guarantee since not all people from my pon are forgers. So already that's a huge limitation. Secondly, you can only do it correctly if you manage to learn all you possibly can about all the different connections your subject's spirit web has. Deep and rigorous study is required for full understanding. And on top of that, even if you manage to do it well, there's still a time limit on it. Depending on the complexity of the change, there will be an ever decreasing time limit on it before it has to be reapplied. So changing a person from Cell into an Elantrian isn't too hard if they live near the city and could potentially have Ionic heritage in their past. Changing a person from Cell into a Mistborn, however, is a far more complex and much larger leap in logic since it's from a totally different world. This means that the change will not last very long, and you'd have to regularly apply the soul stamp to the target to keep the change going. The more complex the change, the harder it is to perform the forgery, and the more regularly you need to reapply the soul stamp. So Forgery, just like Aeon Door, has some nice solid limitations set on it to prevent this power from being exploited. That's why you will never likely find a very evil forger trying to take over the Cosmere. There's simply too many factors for them to consider when using their magic. They could easily become a powerful and dangerous force, yes, but the likelihood is too low for it to be really considered a possibility. And just like Forgery, Bondsmiths manipulate the spiritual connection between people, places, things, and concepts. Unfortunately, unlike Forgery, Bondsmiths have none of these same limitations, and in fact have even more power to manipulate and control connection. Bondsmiths were once very balanced and not too overpowered despite their ability. Just like Forgery, they were kept in check to prevent them from doing anything too crazy. But something changed eons ago that has a profoundly huge impact on the Bondsmiths. Something changed that allowed them to essentially disregard all the prior limitations they have, and now Bondsmiths are some of the most overpowered magic users in the Cosmere. But that's where I'll have to stop part 1 of this video. I needed to really get this foundational information out there for you guys, but you can probably already see where it's going. If I had to try and fit everything into a single video, we'd sit here for ages. For this part, however, I'm happy to just get the foundation set from where we can build our conclusion in the next video. Let me know what you've thought about this so far. Have you already started considering the power of the Bondsmiths and what their true potential could be? Can you see where this is going, or are you still a little confused? Let me know in the comments below. And of course, keep an eye out for part 2 of this video. Anyway, that's been it from me for today, guys. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get this road to 10k party bus really rolling. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. My name has been Raven, and I'll see you all next time. Take care, everybody.